Hey, super friends, my name is Neil, and welcome to this episode 106 of the Get Your Comic Con podcast. We're here fortnightly-ish to bring you a slice of film, TV, and pop culture goodness from our studio direct to your speakers or video device, whatever it is that you're deciding to tune into us on. I normally, if you know past history of this podcast, am joined by my very own boy Wonder Martin, but he has graduated, become Nightwing, moved to Bloodhaven, and like every good Batman, I have a second Robin in the wings, although maybe we should gloss over the Jason Todd thing because, you know, bludgeoned to death with a crowbar by the Joker, and we'll hope that doesn't happen to James. But I'm joined this episode by James.
Hello. First time being on the podcast as well. Well, I did
You
my
hosted
own.
the last couple of them by yourself. You did some specials.
That was always a bit weird because it was just me talking, whereas this is the first time I've actually got someone to talk to, which sounds really lonely, but
Nobody to
finally.
talk to. We are recording this on what is bonfire night here in the UK. So if you happen to hear what sounds like an incredible amount of popping in the background or someone hammering, that is just fireworks. It's just how we roll. I got rid of the roadworks and replaced it with fireworks.
Easy to substitute, really.
Yeah. So we are here for a very special reason, actually, this episode. We're going to start off by wrapping up some of the latest news, as we normally do. We've got some really exciting stories and trailers to talk to you about. And then the reason why I had to have James for this episode, because he is the expert, is we are going to be talking about in theory, we were going to be talking about the first 5 episodes of new Apple TV series Monarch, The Legacy of Monsters. But we now have access to the first 8 episodes of the 10-episode season. I have seen 7 of them. So we're going to kind of give you our spoiler-free thoughts on what we have seen of the series so far. And because it just happens to tie in perfectly, we are also going to talk about a brand new series from DC and Legendary Comics, which is Justice League versus Godzilla versus Kong, which you can pick up the first issue now on digital platforms and in comic book stores, with issue 2 coming a little later this month. So that's kind of what's on the menu for this. I'm excited. I'm looking forward to seeing what you think about Monarch.
It's a bit of a Monsterverse. Actually, like before we kind of kick into it, it's been a really, really cool week for sci-fi in general, but specifically Godzilla. I mean, we've got Godzilla -1, we've got the comic book crossover, and then we've also got Monarch coming out. So, and then we had Godzilla Day. Like literally, was it yesterday? Yeah, I think Godzilla Day was yesterday. So this week, this month, fully dedicated to the original kaiju, which is very, very exciting. Yeah, it's going to be a good podcast, especially for all the Monsterverse and Godzilla fans out there. 100%.
That's exactly why James is on this very episode. So without further ado, let's play that news jingle. So first up in the news this week, I wanted to talk about a very cool concert series which is happening in the UK kind of as we speak. It started over the weekend, yesterday as we're recording this, but the weekend just gone as you're watching this. And this is, so James has been to this, so he can tell you a lot more than I can. But this is the Bournemouth Symphony Orchestra doing their Symphonic Space kind of spectacular concert, which encompasses music from E.T., Alien, Apollo 13, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, Star Trek Beyond, Star Trek Into Darkness, one that I really wish I could have heard, which is Star Trek Picard music from the final season by Stephen Barton. There's Interstellar, Armageddon, Starship Troopers, brackets video game, I see. Battlestar Galactica, there's loads, there's tons in there. So it played on November the 4th at Portsmouth Guildhall, which is where James got to see this concert, and is at the Lighthouse in Poole on November the 11th and the Mayflower Theatre in Southampton on the 17th. It sounds spectacular. Tell us about it. How was it?
I love going to see orchestras doing film, either films in concert where you watch the film on the screen, or just kind of like a symphony of different tracks. It always feels so much more special with a live concert. And I think what's good about something like this is it's an overview of, I guess, the space genre as a whole. So there are things, like Starship Troopers, Battlestar Galactica, that I wasn't that familiar with.
There's some really, they're proper deep cuts, which is really cool.
Yeah, I want to know how they select things, because on the way home we were kind of talking about other space-related ones they could go for, and it was just interesting figuring out how they prioritized it, because you had Avatar on there, but then other things weren't missed out. So there was no Predator, Transformers, or anything like that. So, but the list that we got was just so good. The Bournemouth Symphony Orchestra do such a good job every time they visit, like my hometown,
Yeah.
and it's so nice to be able to have. I don't want to call it niche. I feel like niche is a bit harsh because people do listen to concerts, people do listen to orchestras,
Yeah.
but it's like something that's been growing for a couple of years now. It never used to be that big because now we're getting some of the biggest blockbusters in concert. You know, at the Royal Albert,
Yeah.
Apollo. But I don't remember that ever being something that you could do maybe 10 years ago,
Yeah.
maybe.
It really
But
boomed.
yeah, exactly. But the show itself was really good. I think my personal favorites, Armageddon was a really good one.
Mm.
I know it's probably not the most critically acclaimed film in the world, but the soundtrack is really good and they absolutely nailed it. Avatar by James Horner.
And so
They
was that
played one of
music from the first one or from both or second one?
the first one. I think there's always a bit of a time lapse, obviously, with Picard being, I guess, an exception. Sometimes it takes a while for music that was written recently to then be made commercially available
Yeah.
for orchestra to use. So they played the kind of like the big battle suite from Avatar, which is one of my favorite tracks ever, period. And then some Star Wars, but yeah, it was a really good, really good show. And yeah, the Bournemouth Symphony Orchestra are always really fun, but also kind of get the crowd invested and
Yeah.
included. It's not just you sit there and you listen; you kind of join in a way. But yeah, I absolutely loved it. Yeah, 100%. If you can support them or any orchestra, to be honest, absolutely do it.
And so that was just as you were saying about it, taking a while for things to become commercially available. That was the global premiere of the concert suite version of Stephen Barton and Frederick Friedman's Picard score. That's the first time it's
In
been
my
played anywhere in
hometown,
the world. Yeah, first
yeah,
time anywhere
in
in
my
the
hometown.
world.
Like that was crazy, and
So
he
Stephen
was,
Barton was there.
yeah, and so was the composer of the Starship Troopers.
Ah, okay.
He also did the Guardians of the Galaxy video game on the PlayStation 5,
Hmm.
which I don't know, because the conductor Pete Harrison mentioned Guardians of the Galaxy, and I was like, which one? But it was the video game version, which
Wow.
still had a really good soundtrack. But I mean, there were two composers in the audience. I mean, I've seen the Bournemouth Symphony Orchestra probably 7 or 8 times. We've never had composers like there
It's the kind of
to
thing that
actually.
you would expect at the Albert Hall for like the big London.
Yeah,
So that's cool that
hundred
they went
percent.
more regional.
Yeah, 100%. So that felt really special as well, and that's not something I guess Portsmouth can say they get a lot of.
Yeah,
To be honest, it was a special one. Yeah, it seemed like everyone had a really fun time. So yeah, I
it's
mean,
awesome.
I was happy.
So before we move on to the next story, I will just repeat that again. So you still have chance to catch them playing at the Lighthouse in Poole on November the 11th and the Mayflower Theatre in Southampton on November the 17th. And if you're really interested in diving in behind the scenes, then you can head to our YouTube channel where you can watch James speaking with conductor Pete Harrison about their recent Star Wars concert tour that they did as well.
Oh, that was a nice plug. I remember that. That was a really nice conversation. Yeah, that was about 40 minutes of us just nerding out about
About music.
soundtracks. Yeah, it was. Yeah, that was a really cool one actually.
And it leads me in really nicely to what I need to talk about next, which requires me to get a press release in front of me because there's that much information I need to rattle off. But Paramount has this week confirmed the UK home video details for the final season of Star Trek Picard, for which you have just heard the music played live. So it's already available in the US. So this is the first time it's coming to us here in the UK. The final season will release on DVD, Blu-ray, and limited edition Steelbook on November the 20th, 2023. So it's coming up in just a couple of weeks. The same date will also see the release of the complete Star Trek Picard box set for all 3 seasons, and a very special limited edition, may the gods please let me have one, copy of the complete Jean-Luc Picard story, which is like an amazing box set of everything from the first season of Star Trek The Next Generation all the way through to all of the movies, and then the 3 seasons of Picard, plus some really nice little bonus trinkets as well. So I will rattle off from the press release exactly what you get. Definitive release for Next Generation fans: Star Trek The Picard Legacy Collection, limited edition, individually numbered 54-disc Blu-ray collection, features one-of-a-kind packaging that houses every series and film featuring Jean-Luc Picard, with over 35 hours of special features. Films and series include Star Trek The Next Generation, Star Trek Picard, Star Trek Generations, Star Trek First Contact, Star Trek Nemesis, and Star Trek Insurrection. They're in the wrong order. That should be Insurrection, then Nemesis. Someone at Paramount needs to rewrite that press release. This limited set also includes an exclusive edition of the Wisdom of Picard book, featuring brand new artwork and quotes, along with a one-of-a-kind deck of playing cards, a magnet sheet featuring all of Picard's badges, and 4 custom Chateau Picard drinks coasters. That is everything that's in the box set. There are also special features. I'm guessing you might want to know what's here. On the final season, there is a featurette called The Gang's All Here, another called The Making of the Last Generation, an audio commentary on select episodes, deleted scenes, gag reel, and Rebuilding the Enterprise D featurette.
Wow, that's a lot.
That is a lot. That is a lot. So that, what did I say? That's coming on November the 20th. So you can pick up the final season of Picard, the complete Picard, and also this complete Jean-Luc Picard legacy box set, all on November the 20th, which is very exciting. I will most definitely be picking up at least something. I need to get at least the final season.
This is just a quick question, just because I've been trying to dive into Star Trek a little bit more after watching Lower Decks and Strange New Worlds. You know, that the big box set for Picard. Do you think everything that contains, is that a good starting point for someone who wants to get into Star Trek, or would you recommend?
That's my entry point into Star Trek. So my Star Trek was Next Generation. So that for me is like everything I love about Star Trek and what got me into Star Trek in one box set all the way through. So as much as I obviously I enjoyed the original series, Deep Space Nine, Voyager. I've never managed to finish Enterprise. That's the only one I've never watched all of. And then obviously all of the modern ones I love as well. But if you wanted to watch a particular corner of the Star Trek universe from start to finish and have almost every moment of it be absolutely perfect, Paramount, then this is a really cool box set to get, because Picard's story is outstanding. I mean, you've got people who looked at the original series and obviously loved it, and then were kind of a little bit skeptical when Next Generation came around, but then that brought so many people into Star Trek that I think the reason we still have it and we have so many different series now is because of how versatile people realized it was when they went from the original series to what they did with Next Generation. So to me, it's just, even the bad episode of Next Generation is a great episode of sci-fi TV, if you ask me personally.
Yes, because I kind of started in a really weird, I guess, order. Is I went straight from Lower Decks, into Strange New Worlds. So I have nothing to go on previously from the J.J. Abrams and some of the other movies. The whale one, I remember that one.
So you're not the first person that's ever asked me that question, and the best way to explain it, I think, from my perspective, is when you think about Star Wars, and this is not me knocking Star Wars, because this is not the place for me to do that. But
we'll fall out.
I think if you think about it, a lot of it is based around the basic story that does kind of, well, yeah. I mean, there's more of a reliance on needing to have seen more of Star Wars. Like, if you're going to watch The Mandalorian, you're going to struggle to understand what's going on unless you have a basic understanding of Star Wars. Or
need the context.
Yeah. Or maybe a better one is trying to talk about like Marvel. Like, you can't now watch any Marvel without knowing what's happened before. You need to kind of be watching everything to be fully clued into the storyline. Whereas with Star Trek, each show is kind of its own thing. So there is a shared lore and there are shared histories, and obviously, like, Klingons, for instance, first appeared in the original series and appeared in everything since. But you don't have to have watched everything or watched everything in order to be able to understand different pockets of storyline and stuff. So like with Lower Decks, so many Easter eggs are for fans, but you still love it even though you haven't seen a lot of the things that the Easter eggs come from. And Strange New Worlds doesn't require, even though that those characters were introduced in Discovery, you don't have to have watched Discovery to understand what's happening in Strange New Worlds.
I didn't know they
Likewise,
were in Discovery,
yeah, they
so
do.
I had no idea.
Pike, Spock, and Una are all in season 2 of Discovery for a handful of episodes. That's where they were first introduced. They were cast and brought in there. And it was only because they were so popular in that show that there was a petition for them to get their own show, which is how Strange New Worlds came around. But again, even with the 90s shows, so they did they never really crossed over all that much. What they would do is they would pass the baton. So in the first episode of Deep Space Nine, the Enterprise D from Next Generation is there and Picard appears. And then in the first episode of Voyager, they leave from Deep Space Nine as the space station. And that's the only kind of connection. So
Okay.
they all exist in the same world at the same time in the 90s shows, but they don't even cross over all that much. So you really can go into any one at any point, and that can be an entry point. And you don't have to watch all of them to know everything that's going on. There is no connection whatsoever back then.
Oh, that's good to know. That's
Yeah.
actually good to know. Thank you.
There you go. That was a comprehensive introduction to Star Trek. But yeah, I would definitely recommend it because it looks like a lovely box set and everything that's in it is brilliant.
I will potentially add it to the Christmas list because I definitely want to try and get into Star Trek. Is really the only franchise I haven't conquered. I mean, literally every major franchise, but Star Trek is the one that kind of I struggled to get into properly. But now that I've had a little taste, I've tested the water. Now I actually want to try and get involved a little bit more, and I feel like that sort of box set would actually be a good opportunity for me to actually immerse myself in it and get all the subsequent kind of contextual knowledge I need to kind of
Yeah,
understand it in a way.
definitely. So, just to remind everyone, so that is the final season of Star Trek Picard, available on DVD, Blu-ray, and limited edition steelbook. The complete Picard and also the Star Trek, the complete Jean-Luc Legacy collection, all available from November the 20th, 2023, wherever you buy your movies and TV. So next up, we have a pair of trailers to talk to you about. First of which is for 20th Century Studios' Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, which is directed by Wes Ball. It stars Owen Teague, Kevin Durand, Dickon Lackman. Oh, Dickon Lackman's in it. William H. Macy, Freya Allen, Peter Macon, Travis Jeffrey, Neil Sanderlands, Sarah Wiseman, Raz Samuel. Oh no, I'm going to butcher that name. So I'll just say Raz Samuel and Lydia Peckham. I have to prepare myself with names. I'm always so paranoid on this podcast of getting someone's name wrong. So when I come across a name that I struggle with, then I have a panic. So this film is, tell us, James, when's it coming to cinemas? It's early next year, right?
Yes. I didn't know you were going to quiz me on
May
that.
24th, 2024 is the date that he does not have
It's
off the top of his head.
yeah. Yes, yeah. Very, very excited for that one. It was weird because I
We didn't get
remember
a
when
lot
it
of forewarning that this trailer was coming. It was like, oh, by the way, no news, nothing really about this film.
was.
By the way, there's a trailer coming tomorrow.
Yeah. It was it's interesting because it's somewhat a reboot, but it's also a
Hmm.
sequel.
Yeah, so
So
I'm very intrigued by this because you know a lot more about this franchise than I do. I have seen each of the trilogy. This feels, I mean, like design language feels very much the same, but
yes,
it's sort of, I mean, it's obviously not got Matt Reeves involved, or is he a producer on it? Do we know?
I think the only connective tissue, I guess, is some of the writers and producers have been with the franchise from Rise in 2011, which is a really, really good sign. So there is some kind of substance there which has allowed it to kind of stay connected.
Yeah.
But I think what this is going to launch is a new story, potentially kind of tracing down the roots of the original 1968 Charlton Heston movie.
Okay.
Um, so obviously the first three movies were very much about establishing the Planet of the Apes,
Yeah.
but it seems like this one is we're actually in the Planet of the Apes movies now. So we're seeing a lot of similarities with the original lot. So humans are on the run, they're mute, they're very
Yeah.
feral, but now you've actually got proper civilizations. Whereas before we only focused on Caesar's group. We never saw
Yeah.
any other apes outside of that. But it looks like this time we might actually see I guess in the way that Avatar: The Way of Water worked,
Mm.
where
Mm.
we've got in
Yeah.
the forest apes, and then we've got kind of like an ocean tribe in a way where they're by the water.
Yeah.
So something like that, but you can kind of see some um, influence from Caesar. Like I think this is taking place generations after Caesar's.
Yeah, because obviously there was some rumors for a while that Owen Teague's character was like Caesar's.
Cornelius.
Yeah, but I think yeah, it seems like maybe we're actually moving on much further from there, and we're years ahead, um, making that
And
not
I
the
think that's
case.
exactly, and I think that's going to be interesting because I think what we're going to see is Caesar hailed as more like a god
Hmm.
in a way, as like a I guess a figure of worship.
Yeah,
Because I don't want to say he's a villain yet because I don't know, but Kevin Durand's character is called Proximus Caesar, and
I mean
he's
that
the
sounds
lead.
fairly evil.
But then the Caesar part of it is he kind of trying to um, replicate Caesar's kind of influence, his legacy by taking that name? Is he a villain at all, or is there something else going in there? And what's interesting about the original, I guess the original films, and this is something that the Matt Reeves films never touched on, apart from I guess there was a tease in Rise, is the whole space travel.
Yeah,
Um, they never touch up on it apart from in Rise, where there's a news article about a spaceship going missing.
yeah,
So obviously the original Planet of the Apes is you got Charlton Heston and the other characters crash down, and then it turns out they've actually travelled. I think it's a couple thousand years into the future.
it is, isn't it? Yeah,
Um, but in the trailer, Noah, which is the main ape in Kingdom, is seen using an observatory. I'm just wondering if maybe this is a very, very light subtleties as to maybe them exploring the weirder side. I mean, Planet of the Apes is already a weird story anyway, but I feel like the way that they approached it, it's going to sound really daft, was very grounded
yeah.
because it was a natural disease or a curated disease that
Yes.
caused it. Um, whereas I think time travel, is that too much for what they're, establishing? I don't know, but it felt like they included that for a reason. But I
Yeah.
don't want to jump in and say that is 100% going to be the case. But we could see some of the narrative threads from the original movie make its way into this next bunch of movies if it is a new trilogy or
I was going to
just
say,
two
do we
movies.
have they ever really sort of indicated what they want to do, whether this is another trilogy or whether there's more storytelling beyond this?
I feel like if you do, I mean, War of the Planet of the Apes came out in what, 2017 or 18, something like that.
Yeah, yeah, it
Um,
must have been.
if you're going to wait 5 or 6 years to do another one, I feel like you've got to do it with a potential plan for what's next.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it seems like a bit of a waste to bring back this world without some sort of, I guess, agenda
Yeah.
for the future. So I'd be surprised if it was just the one movie, but I guess that all depends on
Probably depends on the success.
whether financially successful. I don't know if the Planet of the Apes franchise has any legs. I mean,
Oh,
I've
yes,
always
it's a
felt.
question that requires me to go to Wikipedia.
Oh, I mean,
I know what you mean, though. Yeah.
I always felt that the Matt Reeves. I mean, I say Matt Reeves trilogy. He only did the last two,
True. Yeah.
but that Planet of the Apes trilogy always severely underrated. I felt. I feel like not a lot of people talk about it enough. No way.
So Rise was made on a budget of 93 million and made 408, just under 482 million worldwide. So that's pretty successful. Um, Dawn was made for a budget of 170 million, made 710.6 million. Um,
Wow.
yeah, and was 150 million, so slightly cheaper. And actually, the interestingly, War fell back down to 490, just under 491 million. So fell back in line with kind of the first one. So it really peaked with Dawn somehow. Um, which sounds
Dawn
terrible
is a
because they're all very successful and profitable movies. So in theory, worldwide, the Planet of the Apes franchise, including the Tim Burton version and all of the originals, has made around $2.1 billion worldwide.
so it could be something that has it's still got a bit of like fuel in the jet. But
Definitely.
the issue with the Apes franchise is there's nothing else.
Yeah.
Like you can only have the movies. But again, that
Yeah,
could
this
be
isn't
the
the kind of
key.
thing that could become almost like we're about to talk about with Monarch. You're not going to have kind of a storyline movie,
Yeah,
like as in not as in a storyline, as in the A story is in the movies, and then the B story plays out in TV series and other stuff. It's not, yeah, it doesn't, it's not really built for that. There's not enough, really, in my mind, that they could do that.
but then that could be the key to its success is the fact that not that I don't want not to call out any kind of franchises in general, but I feel like there's a little bit of fatigue for um, uh, things that require you, Marvel, um, that require you to essentially digest everything, But with Planet of the Apes, you get the
Yeah,
movies, you go home, that's
yeah,
it. That it is so self-contained, and I think that might be something that people want.
yeah,
So, it'll be interesting to see what the reaction is. But just from looking at what people thought of the trailers, it seems like people are excited. It's just
yeah.
whether it's enough to warrant kind of launching a new, I guess, a
Whatever
new
it is.
era of
Yeah,
the Planet of the Apes is with the trilogy. There was always an end game. The idea was to go from the rise of the Planet of the Apes to a Planet of the Apes. That was the story. But what do you do when you already have a Planet of the Ape?
yeah,
When you already have the Planet of the Apes, where do you go from there?
yeah,
Because the original films, that's when they started taking the apes into human civilization. I'm like, is that might be a bit too much.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
it worked with prosthetics and kind of like the corniness of.
It's
I think
that
it's
era where you could do that kind of slightly more
yeah,
schlocky,
yeah,
corny
yeah.
sci-fi
I
storytelling.
don't think you can do it now because
Yeah,
we've
it's just not
already
what
had
audiences want.
exactly. Because I mean, Dawn and War, there are so many interaction with human characters. There's no point doing it again because we've already had it. So the idea now is where can we take the franchise in a new direction?
Yeah,
But I mean, I'm so excited. I love Planet of the Apes. So really, really keen to see what they have, and I'm really glad that they kept the aesthetic that I think worked really well. Same with the the capture performance as well. I'd like to know if maybe Andy was at all kind of there to supervise,
I
or
presumed it
whether
was his company.
I don't know. I hope so. I mean, that would be
It would be
that would
criminal if
really
not.
100%. But yeah, yeah. I mean, hopefully now that we've got a trailer, we've got ideas of who characters are, who the cast are. Hopefully, we can start getting more information regarding what the actual gist of the story is. Because at the
Yeah,
moment, we don't really know a lot. But
yeah.
regardless, super super excited.
And that is Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, and it is in UK cinemas from May the 24th, 2024. Which leads us into the final trailer, which is a perfect segue to go from there into our big review for this episode. We are going to now talk about the trailer for Godzilla Minus One. So this is official trailer 2. The film is coming to UK cinemas on the 15th of December 2023. Synopsis is: the worst despair in the series history strikes Japan. After the war, Japan has been reduced to zero. Godzilla appears and plunges the country into a negative state. The most desperate situation in the history of Japan. Who and how will Japan stand up to it? And I realized I talked about the first trailer for this last week. This is a bit of a rapid succession of Godzilla. But believe me, if you want to talk about Godzilla, you need a Godzilla expert. So we have one. What did you think of this trailer?
Oh, Neil. I was excited for this movie to begin with anyway, but this trailer really, man, they really highlighted this new version of Godzilla. And what's what's great about Godzilla as a character is we've got the Monsterverse stuff, which is very this idea of a friendlier Godzilla. But then
Yeah.
we've got the original Toho sort of Godzilla, who
And
is
he is a beast.
he just turns up to just destroy stuff. That is his motive. That is his. He's a villain. Um, but from going from Shin Godzilla, which was a little bit, it was amazing. Shin Godzilla has such an amazing following, but it was also a lot crazier, the craziest sort of Godzilla we've ever dealt with.
Okay.
But we've kind of gone back to a more recognizable Godzilla.
And this is kind
But
of a Godzilla origin again, isn't it? Because this seems
yeah,
like his first appearance.
yeah. And that's what's interesting about the Godzilla franchise from a Toho perspective is they're all sort of their own installments.
Yeah.
Godzilla appears most of the time; it's as if he never existed. So more often than not, it's always a first arrival of
Okay.
Godzilla. But it's always I always felt like the tension or the relationship between humanity and Godzilla in the kind of the Japanese films is always a lot more on the fence. Like Godzilla's helped us beat King Ghidorah and Rodan or any of those creatures and monsters, but he's this close to just turning on us. Like
Okay. Yeah.
snap of the fingers, he can just and that's what the new films are kind of setting up is Shin Godzilla arrives, pure devastation, and it's the exact same with this. But I feel like they've taken a more traditional route, but with still some of the coolest ideas. I mean, the last shot of the trailer is his new atomic breath build-up,
Yep.
where his dorsal fins pop out, they extend, and then when he's ready to do his atomic breath, they plug back in.
Mm.
It's it's such a cool charge up because normally we're just used to light.
Yes.
And Monsterverse Godzilla did it really well, where it's this like pulsating charge up that goes all the way from his tail to through his spine up to his head, and then the atomic breath. But the fact that they've introduced something completely different just adds a little bit of spark to it. Like we've never seen this type of Godzilla before. Um, but I think what's good about -1 is that I think it's just going to be a good monster movie, and I feel like that's
Like
something
it
we
seems like
make.
a very, very classic monster movie rather
Yeah,
than the kind of the Warner Brothers legendary ones are obviously trying to do the universe thing, which is cool in its own way. But this feels more like the kind of the like you just said, the kind of the traditional, the classic, which I love. It seems so cool.
like when did we last have a monster movie where it was just monsters being monsters?
Yeah.
There's always a reason. There's always a cause. Usually it's humanity's fault, and that's what Godzilla plays on because when it was launched in '54, Godzilla was essentially a metaphor for nuclear war.
Yes.
That's what he was designed for.
Yeah.
And you get to see that because he is literally a walking nuclear bomb. And each entry in the Godzilla franchise always circulates around that. And I think
Yeah.
that's something that the Warner Brothers Monsterverse moved away from, which is fine because they did their own thing with it, which is great. I think they brought Godzilla to a Western
Yes.
audience, a
Yes.
wider
Exactly that.
audience.
Exactly that.
But then you've got the original kind of films that they stick to what they know. And in a way, I guess for me, who's watched a lot of the original ones, it is sad to see no rubber suit, a person. But on a visual standpoint, this new version of Godzilla looks just so good. And the fact we're getting it in IMAX, 4DX,
Yeah.
you know, I missed Shin Godzilla in the cinema, but this feels like a proper event, and yeah, beyond excited for I guess Godzilla fans everywhere because it seems like everyone is really really pumped for this. And
Yeah. It really does. And so that
what are
is
you?
to remind everyone, as you just said, IMAX and 4DX across the UK and Ireland from the 15th of December 2023. I don't have anything more to say for it because you are the complete expert. I watched this trailer and I thought it looked awesome. That is all I have to say
You
about it.
need all you need. Like it looks awesome. Like it is. It has stripped away all the complexities that some movies try and go for, and it is such a basic movie. It is monster arrives, town city is in despair, they have to try and rise up against it. That is it. That
Yeah.
is, you don't have to worry about anything else. It's just monster movie at its best, but also at its basic, which is when monster movies shine the best because it highlights the monster rather than what I guess some monster movies do, where they try and build the human characters up as the highlight. And no. The monster is the star. That's
Just the start.
something that monster movies have always struggled with. Is you can cast any A-lister Hollywood actor, is they are not important. It's the monster. It's Kong. It's Godzilla. It's the kaiju from Pacific Rim. It's
Yeah.
those things that matter. Sorry, I went on a rant then.
That is the perfect way to segue into what we're going to talk about next. So that is it for the news this episode. As always, if you want to keep up to date with all of the latest news, then head over to our website, which is www.getyourcomiccon.co.uk. And if you want to keep up to date with all the latest breaking stories, then make sure to follow us on all major platforms. We're at Get Your Comic Con. And now is perfect time for me to tell you that we have very, very recently joined TikTok, the thing I always said that we would never do, but we have done it. We're trying it. We will see what happens. But we're bringing you little bite-sized comic book reviews and bits of news and trailer reactions. So please also check us out on TikTok. We're again at Get Your Comic Con over on there. So without further ado, I'm going to play that news jingle again, and then we're going to get to talk about Monarch. So before I start talking about this, because I am always terrible on this podcast, and I will say it in about 10 minutes time when I suddenly remember it, but this is going to be a spoiler free, or spoiler light, we'll say, review of Monarch, which debuts on Apple TV with 2 episodes, I think it is, on November the 17th, and will then roll out weekly for the rest of its 10 episode season. We have been given early access to this by Apple. Thank you very much to the Apple gods. James has seen 5 episodes. As of this morning, I had only seen 2. I logged in thinking I'll watch a couple more so that I'm a bit more clued up before we do this recording. I discovered that we now have up to episode 8, so I've seen 7 episodes of the series so far. So what was supposed to be James telling me what was going to happen is now me actually being ahead and having to make sure that I don't spoil anything that he hasn't seen yet.
It's a bit unfair because I just went on a giant rant about how I'm a Godzilla mad fan, and you're sat there, and I know the fact that you've watched more episodes than I have, and that's
Yeah.
really I don't enjoy that at all. I don't like the fact that you content over me.
Just before we get down into it, this series stars Kurt Russell and Wyatt Russell, who are both playing the same role, which is a very cool idea, which is executed very, very well. It also stars Anna Sawai, Kiersey Clemens, Ren Watabe, Mari Yamamoto, Anders Holm, Joe Tippett, and Eliza Lazowski. And yeah, so as I said, coming to Apple TV on November the 17th with 2 episodes. This is spoiler free. Okay, so what do you think about the episodes that you have seen?
I really like it. I think I mean it's Monsterverse stuff. I have such a I almost said guilty pleasure, but it's not a guilty pleasure. I just love it. Like anything they
Never
do,
a guilty pleasure.
anything they try and do with the world that they're building, I've always been a fan of.
Yeah.
I think what was interesting, or at least I guess in a way cautionary, was the fact they were focusing on Monarch, whereas I guess a few months ago when they were announcing it, I was like, why are we focusing on Monarch when we could be focusing on the monsters that make this franchise? And
Yeah.
but having said that, I really like what they're building up to. Monarch is normally held with such high esteem in the Monsterverse movies, where they're not necessarily the heroes, but they're the ones that have been controlling the monsters. They've been containing them. They're the ones that have been researching them. It's all thanks to them that the world has any information. But now what Monarch does is go, well, yes, but also there's a lot of shade there. There's a lot of grey areas, and Monarch is really about getting into the gritty stuff about a super secret shadow organization, and that's the stuff that I really like because it's not a monster show. I think anyone who goes in expecting a Godzilla show is probably mistaken. But what it is, it's tying up all the fabric that surrounds Godzilla. It's the people who discovered the monsters, researching them, and yeah, I think I really like it at the moment. And I guess a bit shaky on my end. I love the original Godzilla enemies. You know, you've
Yep.
got Rodan, you've got Mothra, King Ghidorah, Gigan, Biolante. You've got all these signature monsters, and Monsterverse haven't used them,
Yeah.
and always upsets me a little bit. But I do admire the courage, uh, I guess courage in a way, to establish their own creatures. And that's something that Kong Skull Island did really well with the skull crawlers.
Yes.
Um, and it's something that I think the Monsterverse is doing really well.
So yeah, that was something I wanted to touch on because I guess just in case anybody is tuning in to this kind of not really clued up as to who Monarch are up to this point, they're kind of first introduced to us in the Godzilla film that kicked off this Monsterverse. At that point, they're really just nothing more than the soldiers who are involved, right? I don't think we see a huge amount of them in that. Is it 2016 that Godzilla, or was it earlier than that?
The first Godzilla was 2014.
2014. And then you go to Kong Skull Island, and that's where you get to see more of them and you get to hear a little bit more about them and dive in a little bit more to what they're doing. And there's some wonderful callbacks to that in the first episode of this show. And then once you go into Godzilla King of the Monsters and Godzilla versus Kong, they're a lot more kind of omnipresent, I think, in the film series at that point.
Yeah, definitely. Because it's oh, I can't remember his name, but it's Millie Bobby Brown's
Yes.
dad and mum, who work for Monarch. And again, it's very much about that idea of preserving the creatures, discovering them, but also studying them in a way to take care of them. And that's what Ken's
Yeah.
character is very much about, is living in, I guess, in paradise, in, you know, with the monsters rather than being at war with them, because they were the
Yeah.
original owners of the planet.
Some
Um,
of that I think is really prevalent in later episodes that I've seen of this as well, where I think there's like a kind of a push and pull between military standpoint, which is we need to protect the world and make sure that the monsters aren't a threat, and then the slightly more ecological side, which is maybe what you saw from I was about to call her Norma. That's her character from Bates Motel. Character in King of the Monsters,
yeah,
because she obviously kind of just in her own strange megalomaniacal way was trying to save the planet by wiping out humanity by bringing out the monsters. Um,
talent sort of thing. Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
and I feel like that is still quite a strong push and pull in this show as well, because I feel like, and some of this is maybe me guessing as to where I think it's going to go, but I feel like there are some characters in this show that, right, actually, question that I need to ask you, because I thought this was set after King of the Monsters, but it's not. This is set between Godzilla and King of the Monsters, isn't it?
Yeah, so there's that little bit of weird time where nothing happens from Godzilla from when he arrives in
San
San
Francisco.
Francisco.
Yeah, because G
to-
Day is quite an important point that is mentioned and sort of seen from different perspectives in the show.
in that pocket of time. So, and I think that's what's it's an interesting, not random. I originally thought it was quite a random place to set the series,
Hmm.
because I was like, the most interesting stuff is happening post Godzilla,
Yeah.
post King of the Monsters. But and I guess I don't know yet, but I haven't seen future episodes. But what I thought this show was going to be about was discovering some of the monsters. So I was expecting references to, oh, we've discovered something in the Antarctic. We've labeled it Monster Zero. That's King Ghidorah, and stuff like that. I don't know yet. So I thought it was going to be about that, but there is this really nice bit of time where you get to see the world react to Godzilla. We saw it in 2014, but
Hmm.
what about I guess, oh, like fire drills at school,
Yeah.
stuff like that, actual routines set up for when Godzilla attacks.
Yes, because I mean, you get a glimpse. You do see a glimpse of that because there is a kind of there's a flashback scene where you do get to see Kate, who is played by Anna Sawai, who is brilliant, by the way. Gets caught up in a kind of Godzilla warning, and you do get to see what happens in Japan when they think there's about to be an attack. And
Or post, it's like they're treating it like it's an earthquake, like it's a
yes,
natural disaster,
yeah,
and I think that's a really cool way of spinning it, is
yeah,
the fact that it's natural. It's not like, well, hey, this shouldn't be happening, we should be doing something. It's like, what can we do against, we've seen what Godzilla can do. We don't have
yeah.
anything for it, because it's not until 2014, sorry, not 2014, it's not until King of the Monsters where they try to um destroy him with a oxygen bomb, which
Yeah.
is actually, they killed him in 1954 with an oxygen bomb.
Okay.
So that a nice little
That's odd.
tie-in.
Yeah.
uh, so at the moment we're in this kind of span of time where they have no idea how to deal with Godzilla as a whole, and they're slowly discovering that actually there's not just Godzilla.
Okay, so
Actually, yeah,
then I think um that it's really going to bug me that I can't remember the name of the woman from the Vera Farmiga. How could I forget the name Vera Farmiga? She's an absolute powerhouse. Right. So, observation number one. I wonder whether Vera Farmiga could turn up in this program.
it'd
Um,
be really cool. I would
that
love
is
to
not a
see a
spoiler, and that's not something that I know. That is a. I get the feeling that this season could end bang into King of the Monsters, which I think is fascinating. Um, I also think then that there are definitely characters who we have seen in this show who are on a shaky ground with Monarch who could end up being part of Vera Farmiga's character's team in King of the Monsters,
oh,
which could be
okay.
how this sort of ties in. I know what I was going to say because I agreed with you that like it seems it is to begin with. You're like, well, hang on a minute. We've seen so much happen from King of the Monsters and Godzilla versus Kong. Why would you not be trying to tell a story that happens there? But then I realized it's the Agents of Shield thing. It's that trying to have a TV series, which is, and I know basically at this point we're saying that there was no connection between Agents of Shield and the rest of the MCU, but for illustration's sake, trying to have a TV series in production that is up to date with movies that are in production is really difficult. So it kind of makes it easier for them to find pockets of story where they're still relevant, but they're not having to be constantly on the phone to the production team on a movie going, are you doing this? Are you using this person? What are you doing? Because they're not sort of, and obviously film release dates, particularly now with strikes still going on, can shift and stuff. So say this season was ready and was supposed to tie into the next film, and then because of strikes or whatever, the next film gets delayed by a year. What do they then do? Or if the story was supposed to follow on from the next film and it was supposed to release like right afterwards and a film gets delayed, what do they then do? So I kind of like that they're most definitely in in the movie universe, but they're not that heavily reliant on continuity that they're sort of stuck with what they can do.
There's not a necessity at the moment. Like,
Yeah.
I want people to go and watch it because I think it's good storytelling, and what we tend to see in the Monsterverse movies is very basic human characters,
Yeah.
very very basic. But what we're seeing now is there are nuances, there are relationships that are tested, but there's also history there that
Yeah.
extends away from Monarch, but more of a family situation.
Yep.
Like 9 times out of 10, monster movies tend to be like, here's a family, they've been split up. It's 2014's. It's Aaron Taylor Johnson trying to get
Yeah.
home
So
to
sad.
uh, Olsen. That
Yeah.
is it. That's at its core. That is basic monster movie storytelling. But with Monarch, there's an opportunity for them to go, well, let's dive into the dirt. Let's dive into how these things were discovered. I never sat back and thought, well, how was Monarch founded? Never even thought about it. We've had, multiple Monsterverse movies that have focused on Monarch as an organization, we've seen them in business. Never once did I think about their history.
Yeah.
What caused them, what triggered them to go, we need to, make something of this because we need to monitor it.
And then you watch
And
it and you go, oh, actually, this is a really good story.
yeah, it's nice to have monsters and human characters that you can kind of attach yourself to.
Yeah.
It's something that doesn't happen all too often. So that's really refreshing for the Monsterverse. I just hope the lack of monsters or Godzilla, in a way doesn't put people off the fact that it's within that universe. Because I feel like some people might tune in going, where is he? Where's Godzilla? Where are all these monsters? It's Monarch. But it's not necessarily about those. It's very contained on what it wants to do. But even without the monsters, there's a very interesting evolution happening from way back post-war
Yeah.
to now. So there's a giant span of time, and the kind of connection points between the past and the present with Kurt Russell and his son is genius. It's so good, but there's a lot of like intrigue about his character as well. Obviously, I've only watched 5 episodes, but there are a few things that are brought up about his character where you're a bit like, something doesn't seem quite right. I don't know what that is yet, but they're leading to something, and
Yes, they are.
it's nice. They still wow. It's nice to have something that is, while Godzilla is the driving mechanic in this
Yep.
franchise, it's really, really cool having something else be of interest, to be
Yes.
of a highlight. So yeah, I think they're doing a great job at the moment, and I'm very, very excited to see what's next, and like you said, what it's actually leading to, because there's got to be a point to this. It's
Yep.
not just, hey, this is where Monarch came from. There has to be a point that they're trying to tell us something. We just need to find out what it is, and what is the consequence of that? Will it lead into Godzilla and Kong, the new empire, or will it lead on to the next Kong movie, or bringing in other kaiju? There's a lot of questions there. It could, it couldn't, but it's keeping you constantly guessing, and I think that's the making of a great TV series, is the fact that it's constantly making you second guess yourself.
Yeah. Agreed. So you've just touched on something about kind of the timelines and the Kurt Russell, Wyatt Russell thing, because both of them are playing Lee Shaw. So Wyatt plays him in the 50s at the kind of foundation point of Monarch, alongside Keiko, played by Yari Yamamoto. And they're very much at the beginning of the journey to develop Monarch. And then you have Kurt in the present day, and he ends up alongside Kate, as I just said, Anna Sawai, and also Ren Watabe's character, whose name is escaping me right now. What's he called? I'm gonna have to IMDb it. And I guarantee you his name isn't Kentaro. Of course, his name is Kentaro. So you have these two timelines going on, and then there are other flashbacks as well to sort of G-Day and other events in key characters' lives, because different characters have kind of a focal point in different episodes. Kiersey Clemens from The Flash is in this as well, and she is brilliant as a character called May that gets kind of brought into all of it. But I guess sometimes when you hear of a premise of a show and you hear that it's going to be jumping around in time a lot, back and forth, telling you time, different stories in different time periods, you kind of immediately think, okay, this is going to be a massive undertaking. I'm going to have to sit and pay attention. Whilst I do think you have to do that, I don't think this is like I don't know. I'm trying to think of an example of something that's way too involved when you watch it. This is fun to watch whilst being quite complex at the same time, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. I'd agree that it's easy to watch, but I'd say it's virtually impossible to be confused by it,
Yeah,
because
yeah. It's
there are
very straightforward in what it's trying to tell you. And it's not in a every 5 minutes there's a massive exposition dump kind of way. It's
no,
very well plotted, I would say.
I think what's interesting about you mentioning exposition is I think one of the things I loved about the early episodes is its coverage of G-Day, which is the attack
Yes.
on San Francisco. Is um, they kind of tell you that they're going there, but I love it when shows or movies like just thinking of some at the top of my head is like the opening to BVS, Batman vs Superman, where it
It
recreates
recreates.
the
Yeah.
ending of Man of Steel. I love it when they do that because it's always really cool seeing it from a different perspective.
Yeah. Agreed.
Um, really impressive about Monarch is that you get to be directly in the action. It's a lot of the time with the Monsterverse movies, you're very much, I guess, voyeuristic in the way that you get to see it from an outside perspective. But with Monarch, you're actually not only from a civilian's point of view, but you're in the center, you're in the heart of
Hmm.
it. This is what people experienced when suddenly 100, meter giant glowing atomic lizard just walked out of water. This
Yeah.
is what it feels like to be in that. Um, and I think what was kind of going back to your point about this whole idea of, I guess, the military
Yep.
side of Monarch is there's a really nice transition from the innocence of Monarch's goal
Yeah.
slowly being consumed by the militarization of the US Army. And that's a really interesting relationship that I'm glad they touched upon because I think that's really cool. Um,
It fits
you've
well
got a
with the
very,
time period. I think
yeah,
time period wise, you kind of had to do that, and they've done it really well.
yeah, yeah, 100%. Very interesting developments that happen early on, but also some detailed throwbacks to kind of archive footage that we saw in
Yeah.
2014's Godzilla. So the fact that they're really going back at the starting point for fans, um, genius, genius. I'm wondering whether they're going to do any more. But at the moment, from what I've seen, is I really love the way that they've incorporated some of the biggest, I guess, moments in Godzilla's history. Um, so yeah, wildly impressed by it actually. Yeah, it's been a real treat as a Godzilla fan to have more content. I think is key. Is we're getting more Godzilla content.
Yep.
Maybe not necessarily about Godzilla, but it's his world, it's his domain. Monarch is about the organization, but you know what caused that? The arrival of Godzilla. He is at the heart of everything. Um, yeah, yeah, super impressed by it, and I think we were going to mention from a visual standpoint as well is with TV shows there's always a bit of fear about the
And you get
scale
me
of
off that. Yeah.
yeah, like oh, will Godzilla look as good as he does in the at the big screen? Will anything look as good as it does in the big screen? The simple answer is yes, yeah, like 100%. Um, but I'm glad that was something that you decided to bring up was kind of like the visuals. It doesn't make a TV show, it doesn't make a film, but it can also break it.
Yes.
But I'm glad
Definitely.
that was something they really focused on.
As you were talking there, I was just doing a quick bit of googling because I had in the back of my mind that there's a season 2 of this, and I think it's sort of a
Is
not.
there?
So I had in my mind that there was, and that they haven't shot anything yet because of strikes. Um, I think really where we are, they haven't confirmed a season 2 officially, like 100% officially. That it, yeah, there are movie
Strong
industry in,
prize.
yeah, there are movie industry job listings which would suggest that there is a second season. um, so I do think that there's going to be more of this to tell in the future as well, which is very very exciting. But yeah, sorry. Well, you just landed on exactly what I wanted to talk about next, which is I kind of over the last few months have watched more Apple TV than I have done probably since it launched. And to be fair, the kind of the show that I know the most from Apple TV is the morning show, which probably has the least amount of special effects in it whatsoever. But I think I'm really glad that this show has landed on Apple because their production values are insane. I have yet to watch an Apple like The Foundation, which is a massive, massive sci-fi epic that's like Dune level, kind of like
Yeah.
crazy visuals and stuff. Is always absolutely like theatrical quality, and that is very much the case with this show as well. Um, there's a couple of moments, I think, in an episode that you've not seen yet. Yeah, it is an episode that you've not seen yet, where
Oh,
there's some green screen which is absolutely fine, but at the same time I was like, well, that's green screen. Whereas I feel like there's moments earlier in the show, and it might even be that I've seen an unfinished version. It didn't say that, but that can sometimes be the case. There there But earlier on there in the series, like in the first couple of episodes, I think all of it is absolutely outstanding, and I have seen more pick your words so carefully. I have seen more creature action than you have, and all of it is perfect, absolutely perfect. It's so well done. Like Godzilla and any other character that might appear. And now I'm just teasing you, but Godzilla just looks perfect every time, and it looks exactly as he does in all the films that we've seen him in.
yeah. What's fun about Godzilla is his design changes very subtly every time we see him.
Yeah,
Um, So I've always wondered about that, but it's one of those things, kind of like Thor's hammer in the Marvel movies. It changes every time until he gets Stormbreaker, but no one ever questions why it changes. And I think that's the what kind of the route they take with Godzilla, where they make subtle changes. From 2014, they made him less beefy.
yeah.
He was quite, he was a big beast, and they kind of slimmed him down in a way to make it work for his obstacles in the future film. So, the 2014 Godzilla, I think, would have really struggled with Kong because he was very slow, but
He went
because
on a
of the
diet after that.
literally like just kale and lettuce for the
Yeah,
rest of the year. But where they scaled him back, they were able to do some more of the I guess fantastical stuff with him,
yeah.
because as much as I love 2014's Godzilla, and I really do love it, I think it's a great monster movie, not necessarily a great Godzilla movie. Is Godzilla just does a lot of walking
Yeah.
and a lot of swimming, whereas King of the Monsters and Godzilla versus Kong, that's where we see him. Um, he's more agile, he's quicker, but he's got a quicker presence about him, and I think that's something that the Monarch show will take into account as well. Even though, would you call him a cameo appearance? You know how like Nick Fury appeared that one time in Agents of Shield. Is Godzilla a cameo kind of character, or is that something you can't say just yet?
For anybody that's listening to this podcast and not watching on YouTube, I'm just sort of smiling in a, oh God, what do I say? For anybody who's seen the most recent trailer, you mentioned this off air before we were recording, but that there are shots in that trailer of Godzilla that you hadn't seen yet in the episodes that you have seen. There is a much stronger Godzilla presence in kind of episode 6 and 7 than there maybe has been in earlier ones. So I would say he's not a cameo, but he's not a lead character at the same time. There's more of him as the story goes on, and the story requires more of him a little bit later on. So that's probably the most political and delicate way that I can say it without spoiling anything.
I'll take it. I'll take it. I knew it would be a on the spot question, and I didn't want the answer to kind of not that I'd worry about putting people off, but I didn't want
No,
it to be
no,
like, Godzilla fans want Godzilla. That
yeah.
that is only natural. And if we turned around and said, "Oh, you know what, Godzilla's not really in it an awful lot," I I don't want to be the sole reason, for people to go, "Well, I don't want to watch it then," because that's what we're here for.
When you get to the big fight between him and Mothra in episode 7, that's just That's really when the kind of monsters kick into the whole thing, and I'm lying to you completely. No, I
I was
think
waiting for you to break because I thought I was like, you just said you weren't going to go into spoilers, but you had such a stern face. I was like, I don't know if he's being serious.
um, no. So I think there's if you were to sort of, obviously we've not seen the last two well, to be fair, I've not seen episode 8 yet, but obviously we haven't seen any of that. You've seen half of it. I've seen a little bit more than that, but I've not seen the very end of it, so it could still drastically change. But I feel like if it continues the way it's building from what I have seen, then I think the first half is very much, I mean, obviously the first couple of episodes has to set the scene as to who these characters are because they're all people we've never met before. And then it kind of hits the ground running at the end of episode 2. You get a little bit more monster action in maybe 3 and 4 when they kind of shift. So actually something that we should say is this show is very, very global as well. So you've got San Francisco, you've got Tokyo, you've
I was just
got
about to say they kind of
yeah,
go on a global scale at that point. It's
yeah.
like you said, episode 1 and 2 is very much concentrated on establishing characters, but once you go from there, it becomes like a globe-trotting adventure.
Yeah, so you go to Alaska and you get some more monster action there. You will eventually go to Africa as well, and there's a bit more monster action there, and that's kind of as far as I've gotten story-wise. But it feels to me like the second half of the season, once you've gotten through a lot of the politics, which is really well written, I should say, I feel like it's escalating towards something bigger. I feel like each
Mm.
episode is getting bigger, which is why I think it might head-on collide with King of the Monsters. And I'm
That'd be
happy to
such a
die on
good.
that hill if I'm very, very wrong.
It's not like it's not a massive hill to die on because it is such a natural progression from Godzilla to King of the Monsters.
Yeah.
Where does King of the Monsters start with? Well, it starts with San Francisco. With the family being broken up,
These are
and
really big Easter eggs towards Godzilla versus Kong.
are
That's all
there?
I'll say.
Oh,
Oh,
but the connective tissue, and I think what I appreciate about this show so far is that it has taken the time to kind of build something that has not only purpose but
yeah.
um kind of like it's interesting. It's interesting TV from at least from my
It is. And
if you know.
it's they're not mutually reliant on each other. So again, kind of stepping away from the sort of the MCU or probably more towards sort of the Star Wars model when you think about shows like Ashoka and Andor, this is adjacent to what's happening in the movies. You don't have to have watched the movies necessarily to get this, which is really good. And you don't have to watch this if you are only really interested in watching the movies. This is like bonus story and
Mm.
extra fun stuff that you can watch if you want. It's
Yeah,
not
100.
required viewing, but it
And
should
there are
be.
little
Right.
things. Oh, 100%, yeah. And there are little kind of references to 2014's Godzilla. I think, without kind of going into specifics, but I think if I remember correctly, there's a really nice reference to uh, Ken Watanabe's character in 2014 about the whole "let them fight." Um,
Yes.
I think there's a really a playful jab at it in a way. But it's nice seeing those little things pop up because again, it's showing that there's awareness, there's consciousness for the past. It's respect the past, embrace the future sort of thing.
Yeah.
It respects where Godzilla first came from. 2014 Gareth Edwards, and now we're moving towards a different style of monster movie for Godzilla's world with I guess in a way where Godzilla has more of a personality slash consciousness.
Yeah.
There are, uh, I guess, in a weird way, thoughts and feelings behind those, scaly eyes, and that's something that we don't really get in the 2014 one. So we're kind of evolving to a new kind of type of Godzilla that is much more of a character than just a destructive being.
Yeah.
And something that I think Monarch helps in that way is they talk about his um, behavioral patterns and stuff like that. And that's the stuff that I really like. Is it's not treating Godzilla as just like a monster. It's actually approaching him as a proper being.
Yeah, totally agree. And I think that is probably a good place to stop because I genuinely can't say anything else without probably spoiling something. So I should stop talking about this program at this point.
I
Which
was
just
trying to
leaves
trip
me.
you up and it didn't work.
I know. Well, yeah, and I've got. So what I will say is, and this isn't a spoiler, there is a word which is very important to something in the movies that is in this program that I have written with a big circle around it that's like, do not say this word. That's all I'll say. So, just to wrap up, Godzilla, no, Godzilla King of the Monsters, you can get that wherever you want to get your movies now. Monarch, A Legacy of Monsters will premiere on Apple TV on November the 17th with 2 episodes and then roll out weekly from there through the rest of the 10-episode season. James will be reviewing it on the website when he has written it.
I
I'm
will
not
just
going
say,
to ask you for a score. Don't worry.
I will say controversial. Well, maybe not controversially, but the popular public opinion is that, from what I've seen based on Rotten Tomatoes, IMDb, is King of the Monsters is the lowest rated, and I really disagree with that. We won't go into it now, but I will say that King of the Monsters is actually my favorite of the Monsterverse movies.
What we will do then is we will come back to that when it is time for the release of Godzilla X Kong: The New Empire.
Oh, good idea. Yeah, okay, I like that. Yeah, cool.
But
Nice.
we are sticking with the Monsterverse a little bit more because before we wrap up for this episode, we are going to talk about brand new comic book series, 7-issue series, which is currently unraveling from DC in partnership with Legendary Comics. And this is the lengthily titled Justice League versus Godzilla versus Kong. It's written by Brian Buccoletto, with artwork by Christian Duce and colors by Luis Guerrero. It has letters by, I'm reading these credits from issue 2. Letters for issue 2 are Richard Starkings and Comicraft's Jimmy Betancourt. You can currently pick up issue number 1 on digital platforms and in comic book stores. Issue 2 is coming to comic book stores and digital platforms later this month. I think it's the 7th. No, it was the 17th of October for issue 1. Issue 2 is releasing on the 14th, I think it is, of November.
Oh, that's so close to Monarch as well. Oh, what a week.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's a very good point. So we will not go into too much spoiler detail on the story of this because we really can't go into issue 2 at all because it's not out yet. But I felt it was really important to talk about it because I currently am trying to make sure that there is always at least one comic book discussed in this podcast, and thought this is kind of the perfect one to go with this episode. It's 21st of November for issue 2. Sorry, 21st of November for Justice League versus Godzilla versus Kong issue 2. I sent this to you and I was like, right, check this out because this is kind of perfect. What do you think? What are your thoughts?
I think what's important to say first is I'm not a big comic book reader. I live in the world where the characters are there, they exist, and I love the characters from the Marvel, DC, but it's not something I really read into. So, but I mean, Godzilla, Kong are in the title, and it's such a bizarre crossover. I really never thought I'd ever live in a world where Godzilla, Kong are fighting against, or going up against the Justice League. That's absolutely ridiculous.
Super fun.
But super fun. A really fun idea. It's a great idea. Why not?
Because a lot of these crossover, so at the moment, there's been several series of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles crossing over with Batman and DC Universe. There's also been Ninja Turtles Power Rangers has had 2 very successful series. Yep. And we just wrapped up Ninja Turtles Stranger Things crossover as well, which is another really completely random one, having the Ninja Turtles in the same world as Stranger Things. But what I thought this did a really good job of was not just doing it for the sake of it. It added some really cool context as to how the Monsterverse has ended up in the same universe as DC, which is interesting. I hadn't anticipated that. I thought it would just be you would just accept it as fact that.
Yeah, it's not just a dump where it's like, here's Godzilla.
Yeah.
let them fight.
Yeah.
There's a reason behind it. There's a story, and that's the key thing. It's like comic books are such a visual art, such a visual medium, um, but sometimes that's where some of the really cool narrative beats, more playful styles of telling a story can come and shine through. And I think this is a really good example of just a bunch of people getting together and going, who would win in a fight,
Yeah,
Godzilla
exactly.
or
It's that question, isn't
Man?
it? Yeah.
Like, I never thought about it, but thinking about it now, I'm like, huh, I don't know. I don't
I
know.
don't know.
And maybe this is something that this this comic book issue will the series will kind of dive into, is when you take the biggest heroes in the world and you put them up against one of the most iconic um cinematic creations, uh you know who wins.
Yeah.
um and that's a really fun thought, for fans of two different things, that they couldn't be more separate. So to see it kind of coexist in the same in a comic book, the panels where you see certain characters together, you're just like, wow, I never thought this would be a thing, right? And there it is.
There's a really cool wraparound cover for issue 1, if you can still get your hands on it in a comic book store, which is the entire Justice League facing down with Godzilla, and it's like it's a proper like double pager. It's really really beautiful, and I think I'm sorry, I've just got issue 1 open in front of me on the computer, and the kind of bookend context to issue 1 is great. It's this really nice moment between Lois and Clark. Feels very ripped out of the pages of Superman. It's a really nice moment where Clark is down on one knee in one panel. So, this is a romantic moment between Clark and Lois, which is immediately interrupted by the arrival of Godzilla, which to me is just amazing. And Godzilla in that. So again, it's a double page kind of splash, and it's like Godzilla looming over Metropolis is just, it looks so cool. He's
You don't
so,
even see him like rise up. He's
he's
just
there.
there.
Yeah.
He's just like he's looking through the window at them. You don't see him rise up slowly out of the water like you do in the movies. He's just like, boop,
And he's got this
there's
really
Godzilla.
beautiful sunset behind him as well, and the water's running off him, and his eyes are glowing, and he's just like, like
Angry
it's time to
looking.
throw down.
Yeah, 100%. And
Issue 1
I
is maybe a little bit slower than issue 2, and I'm choosing my words carefully because I don't want to say too much about issue 2. But although there's a lot of action in issue 1, it kind of isn't lingering massively on Godzilla. He's sort of a teaser. He is more present in issue 2 than he is in issue 1. We've got to get through the setup first and get that whole reason why the universes have collided. But yeah, it's a really worthwhile read, I think.
the setup's always important.
Yeah,
I'd say that I love the basic idea, the conventional monster movie. But when you've got something like two universes colliding, you want to know how it works. You want to know why it works. So, like you said, issue 1 is very much about setting up this foundation for a series like this to actually work and be, not logical, but for people to go, oh, I believe this. I
yeah,
believe in a world where, Godzilla and Kong could be, going up against the likes of Wonder Woman and Batman. So, issue 1 is like slow, but necessarily slow, but
exactly.
not in a
Perfect
way
way to put
that
it.
makes you feel like you're not enjoying it. The pacing is fine, the pacing's great. It's all about that gradual build up that is coming, like Godzilla looming over San Francisco. It's something that is about to happen. It's all
Yeah,
about the how.
yeah.
So that is very much issue 1 in a nutshell, really.
I think the other thing with a big crossover like this, especially where there's a huge fan base, there's probably a huge crossover in fans, but at the same time, both will have their huge fan bases as well. Is there'll be people who'll be saying, oh, I want to see Batgirl, I want to see Nightwing, I want to see Superboy, I want to see Supergirl, I want to see Shazam, or on the other side of things, there's people going, well, I want to see Kong, I want to see Ghidorah, I want to see, I want to see all of these characters. So you really do have to take the time to unravel it properly and bring in people properly, because otherwise you just plop in this huge cast of characters and it makes no sense whatsoever other than let's just see what happens. So I feel like you kind of have to be quite measured, at least in issue one, because you've got so many people to bring in.
I guess that's the danger with something like that as well, is you don't want it to just be bait.
Yes, exactly.
You could put that on a shelf, and because I'm a Godzilla fan, because I'm a DC fan, I could go, well, hey, this looks interesting. But they don't dump it all on you to purely for, I guess, clout.
Yeah.
Like, look, everyone we're bringing in, look at all the heroes, look at all the monsters we're bringing in. It's actually taking its time to unravel something that we've never experienced before. So it's taking its time, it's using its time wisely, especially where comic books, they're not the longest read
No,
in the
exactly. You're
world.
only reading 20, 25 pages a month.
So you've got to be really precise with it. You've got to use your
Yeah.
time wisely. You've got to use the space wisely. So it's not just going for that shock factor, but it's implementing stylized choices which are striking. You know, that we
Yeah.
spoke about sunset with Godzilla. That is a striking image to just
Yes.
establish this whole thing. It sets the tone. There are 1,000 things happening, 1,000 thoughts happening in that one panel. No text, nothing.
Yeah.
Just Godzilla, sunset, and everything that happened before,
Just let it
and
cook.
that's all you need.
Yeah.
It perfect.
Yeah. Yeah. Agreed. It's an interesting roster for the Justice League as well, just for those who are curious. It seems like it's Batman, Superman, Flash, Wonder Woman, Green Lantern, and Supergirl. Supergirl seems to be a big factor in this, which if you are a Kara fan, it's a great time to be alive, because the Supergirl special just dropped in comic book stores last week, and it's really an exciting time for her character. So I'm glad to see a slightly unconventional roster for the Justice League, although no. Oh, Hawkgirl is also in this issue. No spoilers, but you will see more DC characters in issue 2 than you saw in issue 1. You will also see plenty of villains, but again, I'm not going to spoil it for you because I think it's an enjoyable journey. We're trying to remember how issue 1 ends. Yes, it ends on the I love you moment between Clark and Lois. So again, I'm going to slightly veer into dangerous territory, but there is kind of a Superman panel at the end of issue 1 and a Superman panel at the end of issue 2, and they are very different.
Very different. Yeah. Oh, I can't believe we can't talk about it. But that's what's great about something like this, is there's something to talk about. It's,
Hmm.
it's fun, but it's also got those moments where you never thought they'd be on a comic book
Yeah,
page.
yeah.
So I'm excited to see and hear what people think of it. But more importantly, I'm just excited to see what's next, because
It's quite
you know
unpredictable. I don't know where it's going. I don't have a sense of where it's going, which is always really exciting to me as a reader to not go, well, obviously this is what's going to happen next.
you could be, an expert in both Godzilla and Superman, but the issue with that is, you know, two sides of the same coin, I guess.
Yeah,
Um, you've got two gods going up against each other, and who wins really does depend on preference. Because
yeah.
I think in some shape or form, if you were to look at Godzilla and Superman as kind of like the pinnacle of their two worlds, um, they're in a way evenly matched, I suppose. Um, so I guess it would be depending on the way the creators and the writers want to um, mess around with the fandom.
Yeah,
Because I mean, there's a chance they're going to upset Godzilla fans. There's a chance they're going to upset DC fans. Again, not going into spoilers with issue 2 or anything that happens after, but if Godzilla, I guess the perfect comparison is Godzilla versus Kong. I
yeah,
love Godzilla. In my mind, I don't think Kong can win against Godzilla. But the movie obviously went, "Meh, he can." So, there's always going to be this back and forth attitude, this tug of war, where
yeah,
it's like, well, actually, I think Batman could win. I think, Godzilla could win. I think Superman could win. So I think that playfulness is actually going to be, it's going to be fun to see that play out in the rest of the issues.
yeah.
Yes.
So I'm going to finish this by saying or asking you who would win in a fight, Superman or Godzilla?
And this is the problem with being a fan of both, is I was going to tie it in with the question like, well, it depends which version. It depends. In some cases, it really does depend on what version of Godzilla and what version of Superman we're dealing with, because there are different capabilities, there are different, um, I guess, circumstances, abilities, powers.
He is so desperately trying not to answer this question.
I don't want to. I think. Hmm, I think Superman, only because I think he's got more in his arsenal. I think I think Superman has more to offer in terms of abilities, whereas Godzilla has his atomic breath. He's strong, yes, but I have a feeling there's probably a limit to what he can do, and I think Superman is probably someone that could exploit that. But it wouldn't be an easy fight. It'd be a close call,
No, seriously, it
100%.
would be. It's serious.
Like, Godzilla is a very powerful creature. He's, a walking nuclear bomb. But more than that, he's got experience. He's ancient.
Yeah.
He's been around for thousands of years. So he has that to, I guess, balance out Superman's powers. So I think Superman, but it'd be a very close match. Yeah, I'm gonna go with that. I'm gonna go with. I can't believe I've just sided with Superman after just
Neither can
essentially
I. Neither can I. A
talking about
whole
Godzilla.
podcast on the Monsterverse, and you sided with Superman right at the end.
I betrayed my boy.
Which just leads me to say again, for those of you who didn't pick this up at the beginning, but issue 1 of Justice League versus Godzilla versus Kong is in comic book stores now, and issue 2 is releasing on the 21st of November. It will then roll out for another 5 months after that. There's 7 issues altogether, so plenty more story to come from this one, and I will make sure to keep you in the loop as to what's going on with that storyline as well, because we all want to know who wins. And
Yeah,
that brings us to the end of this Monsterverse podcast. So it just leaves me to say thank you to James for bringing your expertise. I needed some backup on the Monsterverse, so thank you very much.
no, thank you. It's nice having a
I was going to
platform
say, you
just
don't
to.
really have to say thank you for having me because you are part of the team, so you know.
Well, like I said at the beginning, I've been with you for 4 years. We've never kind of organized an opportunity to kind of jump in, but the fact that you were able to kindly curate a podcast that was very much centered around the things that I'm passionate about.
Yeah,
I do appreciate that, because that gives me a voice to talk about the things that I'm really, really passionate about in a much more spontaneous way. The
true.
articles I write very kind of not formulaic, but
More
it
purposeful.
doesn't.
This is more off the
Yeah,
cuff.
yeah. It's more about providing information, where this is more of a, I guess, a chat between friends,
Yeah,
but also that has the kind of experience and information from two different fandoms.
yeah.
I've learned stuff, and I hope
I have learned
listeners.
too.
There you go. See, we're both much more smarter now.
And with two and a
But
half
no,
minutes left on the Zoom call, it just leaves me to say that if you want to let me know what you thought of any of the things that we talked about on this episode, then you can find me on all social media platforms. I'm at Neil Vag. James finished swigging from his can. Where can people follow you on social media?
on Instagram, I'm mostly on Instagram. I'm just I can never remember. Oh, it's just at James Casey Lister 97, or on X. I almost called it Twitter
You can still call.
again. At James Lister 97. They're my two platforms. So yay.
And we'll be back with a brand new episode in a couple of weeks. I don't know what we'll be talking about in a couple of weeks. The Monarch will have started. And what else have I been watching recently? Ooh, I don't know. It might have to be a surprise. We're at that time of year where horror movies have kind of ended. So we'll see. We need to get ready for the holiday season. I'm not ready for Christmas. I'm not ready to give up on Halloween just yet. But
I'm
yeah,
the opposite.
you've already done all your
Controversial.
shopping. I know.
I've already done Christmas shopping. I was ready for Halloween to be over at the beginning of October. So really not a Halloween person at all. So I'm kind of glad to see the back end of it. Um,
Normally, I have an
sorry.
idea about what I'm going to be talking about in the next episode, but I genuinely don't know because I've been so deep in clearing the backlog of stuff that needed doing. But we will see. But we'll be back in a couple of weeks anyway. So until next time, stay safe, stay well, and I'll see you very soon. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for watching, Super Friends. If you enjoyed this video, then make sure to hit the subscribe button just down below and hit the bell so that you can get notified whenever we release brand new videos. In fact, there's 2 more waiting for you to watch right here below. So what are you waiting for? Why not click play?